Support comes from MSNBC. The first presidential debate was like no other. The second was canceled after a White House COVID outbreak. Thursday, NBC News' Kristen Welker will ask the questions in the candidates' last scheduled face-off before Election Day. Join MSNBC as Rachel Maddow, Nicole Wallace, Joy Reid, Brian Williams, and their team of political experts help bring clarity to a night that could reshape the race. And Steve Kornacki will break down the latest data for you at the big board. The next and final presidential debate. Watch Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC.
On this episode of Newt's World,
there's a lot going on, right? Whether it's the Black Lives Movement, whether it's Corona, whether all the other things that's going on in the world. But for me, I feel like these things are coming to the forefront for a reason, right? And so we have to know what's not working to get to a place of what is working, right? For me, I have to trust in my belief that we are heading in the right direction. This is nowhere near over.
It's hard to think about anything but COVID right now. Things just don't seem that great.
One of the hottest topics right now, the coronavirus. I think compared to other countries, how we've handled it is not good. I'm still worried on what is going to happen and how we're going to be moving forward with the economy and the virus.
Media polarization, both ends, sowing discord essentially throughout the general population. The two-party system bothers me. It's been on a bad track for a long time. You're always voting for the lesser of two evils.
Not everything we read in the media is true, and things are skewed, but I think that's definitely a positive that came out of, I want to say, the riots and COVID, that people aren't just trusting everything they hear anymore.
Hi, this is Newt. Due to the virus, I'm recording from home, so you may notice a difference in audio quality. You've heard a lot about how important undecided and independent voters are to deciding who wins the presidency, the Senate, Congress, and gubernatorial races around the country. What is on the minds of independents and soft Republicans and Democrats? What are the issues that really matter? I think that it's very important to recognize how complicated polling has become, both because voters are more resistant to answering questions and because there are a lot of different ways to communicate now that didn't used to exist. One of the people that I'm really like working with, who knows a great deal about this, is John McLaughlin. John McLaughlin's a remarkably successful pollster, strategic consultant. He's the CEO and partner of McLaughlin Associates. He's earned a reputation for helping some of America's most successful corporations and winning some of the toughest elections in the country. In 2016, John worked as an advisor and pollster for candidate Donald Trump from the primaries to Election Day. He continues to advise President Trump and the White House in campaign today. We've been working with John and have done a series of focus groups and polls, particularly asking questions about the challenges that independent voters feel they face, and also because of what happened this summer with the killing of George Floyd and the reaction to it. We wanted to focus specifically on how they react to Black Lives Matter and what their thinking is about that. We're concerned in part about how do conservatives broaden their base of voters and attract new people who share the same values. John, from your perspective, what's the state of the race now?
Right now, it's very close. There's a lot of polarization like we've never seen before. And 2016, after the president had won, we were talking about the results. He was telling me it was a huge win. And I said, well, it was only 78,000 votes out of a record turnout of 139 million. But it was a historic election. And we're really headed for another historic election when you think the challenges that we've seen as a country and a world right now, where you've had this global pandemic, you've had the recession level, high unemployment numbers, created a lot of anxiety and stress. And then you had the terrible tragedy of George Floyd dying, which triggered national protests and riots and looting and violence. And so the country was really stressed out. And the research that Gingrich 360 had done prior to the pandemic taking over, that research showed that voters had a lot of anxiety. They were worried about simple things like their own financial background, their financial security. They were worried about their own health care. They were worried about their children's education. They were worried about their own future. So they had all these anxieties to begin with. And now you're getting this compounded by the stress of the whole situation, what we've gone through the past year. And people are dealing with it, and the American economy is bouncing back, and people are going back to work. But here you've got another historic election. I mean, you and I have seen historic elections before. One of the great moments of my career was back in 1994, in September 94. You had developed the Contract for America, and I had done a poll for the RNC, and I was able to deliver it to Bob Michael and yourself and the Republican leadership. And I said, I've never seen a +7 generic Republican ballot for Congress before. And I said, as long as we don't compromise with Hillary care, the voters will reward us. They like the contract, and we'll have a Republican majority, something I'd never seen in my lifetime. So that was a piece of history that I'm proud to have been a part of, or at least a witness to what you had done. Here, again, we're looking at, this is unbelievably historic times, and the challenges. We will have a record turnout of voters before, and it's extremely close, and you can tell how close it is by the way the politicians are trying to change the rules of the election before the election. One of the things I say is, if you don't believe that the polls are close, then why in North Carolina did the Attorney General enter into some agreement to allow ballot harvesting, get rid of witness verification of absentee ballots, and also extend the mail-in balloting days from 3 days after the election if they have a postmark to 9 days? And it's going on in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, places where the Democrats control either the governorship or the legislature. They're doing things to change the outcome of the election, because 4 years ago, I always thought that they didn't take President Trump seriously, that they didn't think we could win. So this time around, they're afraid that President Trump will win again, and the establishment is going all out to stop him.
Could you, John, just take a minute and describe the difference between a focus group and a poll?
Well, a focus group is qualitative research, where you're trying to get the reasoning, and the poll is quantitative research, where you're trying to assign a number to it and see what the prevalence of public opinion is. So what will happen is, you took a national poll before you did the focus group research, so you could identify which segments of voters you wanted to have a discussion with. So the poll would tell us how many people were concerned about the economy, how many people were concerned about homelessness, how many people were concerned about drug and opioid addiction. And then you would get certain segments of voters, whether they were millennial or Gen Z voters, whether they were African Americans, whether they were Hispanics, whether they were independent women, etc. You would get those voters and you'd have the discussion. So the focus group would tell you why. The poll tells you what's going on, and then the discussion of the focus group is telling you why. In the focus groups, you can see the voters. When you take a poll, whether it's online these days or whether it's cell phone or landline, you don't see the voter. You see their responses, and you assign a number to it based on the percentage of the voters that are Republicans, Democrats, liberals, moderates, conservatives, etc. So you get those numbers, and then when you bring certain types of voters into a focus group discussion, and now after the pandemic, most of these focus group discussions are done online. Before that, you could bring them into a focus group facility or someplace where you could have a discussion. You can see the anxiety, the body language. You can have a very good discussion with the voters to understand what they're feeling and what they think the right solutions are. The quantitative research of a poll is important to give you the lay of the land. The qualitative research of a focus group is important to give you the emotion of it. Why are people concerned about this and what they think needs to be done?
Hi, this is Newt. I want to invite you to sign up for a yearly subscription to my Inner Circle membership club. We're in a critical time in our history where the outcome of the next election will set us on a course of two very different American futures. As a member of my Inner Circle, you'll receive exclusive invitations to join my video conferences with 2020 election updates and my analysis of the upcoming presidential debates. Here's a special offer for my podcast listeners. Join my Inner Circle today at newtsinnercircle.com, and if you sign up for a 1 or 2 year membership, you'll receive a limited edition Inner Circle Challenge coin, exclusive to 500 members only, as part of your membership welcome package. And as an Inner Circle member, you'll receive an invitation to attend my members-only event, Live with Newt, a discussion on the next presidential debate. And there are many other benefits of membership. Sign up for a 1 or 2 year membership today at newtsinnercircle.com. That's newtsinnercircle.com. One of the things which really emerged this summer is Black Lives Matter. So when we focused in on the whole question of race in America and race relations in America, did you run across things that surprised you?
I wasn't surprised by the level of people that were initially sympathetic to Black Lives Matter because it was aspirational. And America being the greatest country on earth, and America being a country that has fought against racism, fought for liberty and opportunity for all people, for all citizens, you weren't surprised at the reaction of people wanting to end racism. What the difference was the lack of knowledge about the organization. So Black Lives Matter basically was more of a brand and a slogan than the perception of them as an organization. AP Nork did a poll, and their headline was "Support for Racial Justice Protests Declines." And they had 44% of Americans were now disapproving of the protests in response to police violence against Black Americans, while only 39% approved. In June, it was 54% approved. Initially, the peaceful protests that quickly evolved into riots and looting, as you would expect, would decline, but still, some people still support these protests after it's become violence. We are a peaceful, democratic society. We have a Bill of Rights for a reason. We support people to voice their opinions, to be able to go out and freely associate and peacefully protest. But certainly what the vast majority of Americans still don't condone it when it goes to violence. And what's really interesting, the public opinion is moving on the subject. And I think what you found in your research is people do want to end racism. They recognize it exists. They want to end it, but they certainly don't condone an organization that has underlying Marxist sympathies or the leadership might want to burn down the system. The vast majority of Americans would reject that.
Part of what I found intriguing was two different things. One, how you frame things can lead to an enormous shift in what people say to you. For example, there was a huge support for peaceful demonstrations. But then if you also ask exactly the same people, do you think that we should defund the police? There was huge opposition to defunding the police. And the other that struck me was that people who initially had been told one thing by the news media and therefore had responded to that framework, as they watched over time, concluded that that wasn't accurate, and they really shifted. That's part of what happened. My sense from all the work you did was that Black Lives Matter as a slogan was terrific. And then as people began to realize exactly what the organization was, what it was trying to accomplish, what its founders believed in, support actually dropped at a pretty rapid rate.
Specifically, when you talk about defunding the police, with the African Americans in the group, you had an African American woman saying it doesn't make sense, and another African American woman saying, I really don't know what defunding means. If it totally demotivates the police, that is not helpful. So you have a situation here where African Americans were like, no, we don't want to defund the police. That's a really bad idea. Because people would immediately equate it to an increase in crime. Back in June, we had a national poll where 6 out of 10 voters didn't support defunding the police, and 3/4 of all voters thought it would lead to an increase in crime. They recognize that there was a situation to be fixed, but defunding the police was really a radical idea that the vast majority of Americans don't support. They see what it would lead to further crime at a time when people are already stressed about financial security and their personal safety.
When you looked at all the material, was it your sense that people are optimistic about the future of race in America, or pessimistic or uncertain?
Particularly younger voters, they were absorbing the media line that America has systemic racist problems that need to be solved. And I think the pandemic, people were already stressed out. And you got suburban women basically saying there's a lot of racism in America, very hard for black people to have a chance. They want America to be a more tolerant society, a less racist society. The aspiration of ending racism is very important to them. So I think that's a good thing in terms of society.
How do you think all this fits into the campaign and what we're going to see in the next few weeks?
Initially, before the pandemic, the president was doing very well with African American voters and Latino voters. In the last election, the president got 8% of the African American vote, and he got 28% of the Latino vote. And prior to the pandemic, he was definitely running well above that. He was headed for, say, 15-20% of the black vote, and maybe someplace between 30 and 40% of the Hispanic vote. And it's still possible that he's going to do better than the last election. But I think a lot of this became politically charged precisely to drive down his support among these minority groups because they're considered essential to the Democrat Party. We're headed for this historic election that some people are trying to say, okay, we don't want President Trump to do better with African Americans or Hispanic voters or any groups. They're feeling this anxiety, which is really not a good thing right now.
Part of what makes this such an unusual year is you have a pandemic, you have people locked down, you have an economy which went very badly down and now is coming back up with amazing speed, and you had nationwide riots and demonstrations, many of them organized by people like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. I mean, all these things are happening simultaneously. When you look at the data that you're looking at and you look at the focus groups we've done, how do people sort all that out?
Well, initially, even before the pandemic hit and put more stress on people's anxieties, they were already concerned with their financial security, their healthcare system, their own personal lives, the future of their kids. People were certainly concerned about levels of debt, what was going on with their family, et cetera. And what they were looking for is they were looking for leadership. And I mean, in a large way, President Trump provides leadership regardless of the situation, and he keeps moving forward, where some people were advocating a second lockdown. I mean, Joe Biden was talking about a shutdown again. And the president was, no, we have to keep reopening the economy, and the virus is subsiding. And as the virus subsides, the economy reopens, schools reopen, people go back to their normal lives. And you now have a situation here where people are going to be reassured when there's a vaccine that they'll be able to take the vaccine and their lives will be safer and better. But there's still some people who would even argue against, when we get to the point when we have a successful vaccine, that they may not want people to take it right away. So that doesn't make an easy answer for people when you're already stressed about a lot of different issues. They're looking for leadership, and they're looking for somebody to have a positive solution to serious problems in their lives. And they know that for a while things were going well, and that's why the president was doing well pre-pandemic. Now the pandemic, which has caused a lot of stress, as it subsides, people want to get back to normal, what they knew was life before the coronavirus.
It seemed to me that part of what you surfaced in the focus groups and in the poll was that people were really looking for leadership that at a practical level, not an ideological level, just would make their lives manageable. A lot of these things are just plain, how do my family and I survive? They're not theoretical or philosophical ideas. They're very practical ideas. Has that changed, do you think, with the intensity of the experience of the last year?
A lot of the people we spoke to were precisely those people who would be in the middle or swing voters during an election, whether they were younger voters, Gen Z or millennials, whether they were independent women, suburban women, African Americans, Hispanics. It's not an ideological group. So what they're really looking for is they're looking for leadership, and they're also looking for smart, common sense solutions where they could identify with, this is the best way to get rid of the debt in your life. This is the healthcare coverage. This is the way to stabilize the American dream for people, to make home ownership real again. They weren't looking for something that was unusual. They were looking for basic things, very understandable goals in life where they would like to have not a lot of debt, be financially secure, have a job, be able to get their kids into school, be able to save up for retirement, be able to buy a home, just the basic American dream. They'd like to feel that secure, and they'd like to have those aspirations that are able to achieve those goals at a simple level. And they're looking for the political leadership that says we can do these things by doing X, Y, and Z.
When people go to our show page and look at all the material that we're posting, so it's available to anybody, Democrat, Republican, because it's really an effort to say, this is kind of the conversation we need as a country to begin to solve these problems. Were you made more optimistic about the underlying desire of the American people to make America succeed and have their lives successful within an American experience? Were you more optimistic or less optimistic after you got done doing these?
I was more optimistic, and the reason is because, granted, there are some radical solutions out there. At the time when you're doing this research, socialism was percolating. But they had a good view of capitalism versus socialism, that capitalism is not perfect, but it's the better system. And certain things need to be done to take care of people, et cetera. But they didn't want to have some sort of radical solution that would underline our future and our values. They still wanted the American dream. They still wanted capitalism. They still shared a sense of values and optimism. They just want the leadership to be able to get there. And as far as healthcare goes, they didn't want something radically different. They want something where they'd be assured they'd get good healthcare, pre-existing conditions covered, et cetera. They were also looking for a reasonable, better expectation of their lives, that it was not something that they wanted to have a radical reform or a radical change in their lives. These were modest aspirations of goals for their family, for the American dream, for their personal lives. And they didn't come in with anger. They didn't come in with hate. They were pretty tolerant Americans who wanted to get along and wanted to take care of their own lives and their own families.
That's great. Listen, John, thank you for doing this. And I think people will find it very helpful. And I hope they'll take the time to go and look at all the material that we have at Gingrich360.com/polling. It's really pretty remarkable. And I'm delighted that you have been a partner in developing all this.
Well, I learned a lot as I was doing it. The information that you have on your website and the research that you did at a really historic time kind of forecast what was going to happen. And at the same time, is a good way to guide us through the challenges that the country's facing right now. Thank you for letting me help you with this very important information at a really critical time in our history.
Newt's World is produced by Gingrich 360 and iHeartMedia. Our executive producer is Debbie Myers, and our producer is Garnsey Sloan. Our researcher is Rachel Peterson. The artwork for the show was created by Steve Penley. Special thanks to the team at Gingrich 360. Please email me with your questions at gingrich360.com/questions. I'll answer a selection of questions in future episodes. If you've been enjoying Newt's World, I hope you'll go to Apple Podcast and both rate us with 5 stars and give us a review so others can learn what it's all about. I'm Newt Gingrich. This is Newt's World.